Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Pharmacist Diaries podcast. We are on episode 5 of this 6-part series talking about consultant pharmacists and the consultant pharmacist pathway. And I am super fortunate that I am in front of a brilliant pharmacist named Chloe Benn. She is a consultant pharmacist in paediatrics currently working at Barts Health NHS Trust, and she's a specialist pharmacist in cystic fibrosis at the moment at the hospital. But she has so many other talents, and one of the amazing things about her is that she has worked alongside the Royal Pharmaceutical Society and is currently helping them with the credentialing process to become a consultant pharmacist and working on the framework. She loves education and training. She's mentored lots of pharmacists through the journey. So if you are looking to pursue this pathway, she may be a good contact to have. And I'd like to introduce her to the podcast. Welcome, Chloe.
Thank you for inviting me.
No, I'm super excited and really excited to kind of dive into career development for this kind of episode of the series and talking about everything from networking to mentoring, the kind of educational side. And you've got a little bit of a different spin, a behind the scenes spin, because not only are you a consultant pharmacist, but you've now also supporting the Royal Pharmaceutical Society with the actual process to become a consultant. So this is really exciting for people who are tuning in, who might be listening or watching the episode, because they'll learn a lot from you. But before we dive into that, tell us about your journey into pharmacy and why you also became a consultant pharmacist in the first place.
Okay, yeah, it's quite a long story. It's been a little while, so yeah, thank you. So I came to London as a pre-reg, and when for my junior job, I'm so old, I was called a basic grade, which would be like a band 6 now, at Barts Health. And so I was really fortunate to get loads of really good clinical training and lots of experience then, and moved up into some specialist roles in paediatrics. And at that point, then what would have been like a C grade, it's sort of a bit like a band 7, started getting lots of experience, being kind of thrown in the deep end, I guess. And I think that's, for most people's professional development, often it's an opportunity. When you've been asked to do some quite hard things, being left whereas, teams come and go. But I definitely found my passion in paediatrics, and decided that was something I wanted to stay in. And I moved on into a senior role at Barts, doing peds for a while. And then I left and moved over to the Royal Free, where I also was then lead for women's and children's over there for 12 years. Lots of things happened in that time. And one of the things, so I'd been sort of a band 8 working in women's and children's for quite a long time. I got, quite comfortable with the clinical stuff. And then I was offered the opportunity to take the advanced practice MSc that the School of Pharmacy in London offer. And that, I think, was probably quite a big key thing in terms of my career, because as well as the learning and development aspect, which focused on education, management and leadership, and research, so it was a 3 kind of part course. So as well as your assignments in those areas, you had to produce a portfolio mapped against the advanced and consultant level framework. And that, I think, was a really powerful thing, and why I'm so passionate really now about professional development and about using the frameworks, because I found you can really identify your gaps and work out what you need to do to move forward. So I suppose sort of 3 key things that came out of that was leadership, and I found an opportunity to start leading the London sort of regional subgroup of the neonatal Paediatric Pharmacy Group, MPPG, that I'm still working with. So there was that kind of leadership role. So then also we did like research. So part of the course, we had to develop a research project. And then after the course finished, I was able to then lead some students who could conduct the research. So that enabled that work to be finished and published. So that was really good. And eventually, after several years of practice, of attempting to get there, several years, I managed to be really fortunate to get elected onto the National MPPG Committee. And through doing that, I then led the education subgroup, and we revamped our offer for beginning pharmacists in paediatrics. We developed the course, we've now called it SOCMO, starting out in children's medicines optimization. And so, those three things I think really helped push my portfolio and show that I was practicing at a higher level. I got an opportunity to work with the RPS when they were doing their faculty development. And so was really kind of in on the ground there. And so then a few years later, I submitted a faculty portfolio. So the faculty was the sort of preliminary to what the RPS are offering now with the advanced credentialing and the consultant credentialing. So I put in a faculty portfolio a few years after I'd done my MSc, and I came out with a credential there that then meant that when a consultant post came available, I was eligible to apply for that. So I think that was kind of a process over a lot of years. It's not something that happens really quickly. And I think as well, because all of this stuff was quite new at that time, I think you could probably do it quicker now. But yeah, it took 19 years from qualifying to getting my consultant post. So
let's have a heart-to-heart about hormones, shall we? As a pharmacist, I see so many women struggling with PMS and menopause symptoms. It's like your body's throwing a tantrum and you're left dealing with the aftermath. Enter Saffron Energy. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can one supplement help with all of that? Well, buckle up because I'm about to drop some truth bombs. If you're intrigued, head on over to thenakedpharmacy.com and use code PD20 for 20% off your purchase. I mean, we talked about this in the previous episodes in this series, that every pharmacist will experience a different kind of duration in the journey as to how long it will take you to become a master or a consultant pharmacist and have that level of kind of expertise in a specialist area. But we've also talked about the fact that it is a long game. There are going to be ups and downs in your career journey, which maybe, a year you might really push really hard and get loads and loads of evidence towards your portfolio. But then maybe next year you might, have personal issues or a pregnancy and, you have your first child and things slow down. I mean, during COVID, obviously a lot of people's career pathways kind of shifted. For some people, actually spending more time at home allowed them to really drive things forward in terms of their career journey and getting evidence. Whilst for other people, they had to completely drop everything and support with the pandemic. So we've kind of talked about that in our other episodes from this series, which is really interesting. But it is a long journey. It does take time, and it does mean that you have to spend kind of years getting to the point where you get to that level of expertise. But it's absolutely manageable. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of strategy that goes behind the development piece. If you were thinking early on in your career, when you were a band 6 and when you were a band 7, before you stepped into this MSc, what were the things that really helped you in terms of the strategy to build those kind of skills to get you to the point where you knew I could apply?
I mean, early on, I suppose the things that are kind of quite key were that foundation level. So a lot of people do a diploma. And so I did that in those days. It wasn't all in one. So I did a certificate and diploma in clinical pharmacy practice. So that was very much the baseline. I think the sort of just professional development in terms of being in areas where I was rotating at that point through different areas, seeing different things. I moved trust. So again, I saw practice in different ways. I think you need as much as you can, like a broad breadth of experience. And then, as you say, going on from there, I think you learn in lots of different ways. I don't think it's necessarily about courses. I think now you've got as well, I mean, we probably had the sort of foundation level framework quite early on, but now the advanced credentialing is something that's quite new. And I think that would be the middle step. So I think, chunking it into steps and thinking about where you are at this point in time and what you're going to focus on. So once you've been through foundation credentialing, then you can go on into looking at your advanced credentialing before you move into consultant. So I think that's part of it, is to sort of think about different things, but also I think what's really important in the consultant credentialing is that there are the 4 pillars, but you don't do them all in one go. And I think most people will quite rightly focus on their development of their clinical expertise, whether that's specialist or generalist. I think that's something you're going to spend a lot of time on. And then you generally have, and I certainly did find, you have a lot more opportunities in terms of education and training. So focusing on leading in professional development, helping others, whether that's teaching, developing courses like I talked about, mentoring, and all of those things come into that phase. And then you've also got the research aspects. They're harder, I think, to do on your own, depending on where you work and what support and mentoring you're going to get in work. And that's where sometimes an academic course is really helpful. So I definitely think that the master's was helpful for me going there. In what probably would happen now, I didn't do my NMP prescribing until after I got my consultant role. It wasn't something I'd been doing in my previous role. But I think that is something that, again, for all the newbies coming through soon, they'll be doing it when they're very young, junior. But again, I think it's a really important part if you want to be a patient-facing pharmacist, is going to get your prescribing.
When you look at the pathway that you've generally followed and what a lot of hospital pharmacists follow, there is a lot of structure that's already kind of written out for you. You do your rotations as a band 6, you do your diploma, and you get that kind of experience of audits and QI projects, your therapeutic reviews, you're doing lots of case-based discussions, mini KEXs, all of the things that you need for your basic kind of foundation. And you are building a portfolio as part of that diploma. And what I think is really valuable to share with the younger generation who might be listening or watching this podcast episode is to actually continue that portfolio on. Because I think once you get into a specialist role, you sometimes focus so much on learning and becoming an expert in that specific area. You may do education and training to other healthcare professionals, to other pharmacists, or you may get opportunities to go work at a local university as a lecturer. You also get involved with research sometimes, which is part of the team that you work with in that specialist area. But a lot of people don't document what they do. So a lot of people are doing the work and they're actually getting evidence that demonstrates that they could work towards the advanced pharmacy framework or become a consultant, but they don't necessarily document or sign off that. And then years can potentially go by and you forget all the things that you've actually done in your career because you're just going with your day-to-day flow. So it's really important that you get into the habit of writing or documenting your journey and reflecting on what you're doing so you can say, actually, do you know what? In the last year, if I look back, I've done so much in terms of research, but I haven't really spent that much time in education. That's definitely a gap in my practice. And when I look at the portfolio and what I have to build, these are the gaps that I now need to work on. And then you can have different strategies or goals or, smart objectives that you work towards to help you to basically smallen the gap.
Definitely.
And that's really interesting because it seems that the MSc actually provided the structure that you really needed because the topics are leadership, research, and education, and 3 massive areas as part of the consultant pharmacist portfolio that you're learning. You're in a structured place to do that. You're definitely implementing strategies probably in your day-to-day work, but you're also creating your portfolio at the same time.
I definitely see that because I'm mentoring a lot of people currently who are trying to submit a consultant portfolio. And absolutely, I think a lot of people sadly get to that stage and possibly they've tried to submit a portfolio that wasn't successfully credentialed in the first instance. And it's not necessarily that they're not practicing at that level. It's very much to do with that they haven't got the right evidence documented in their portfolio. So absolutely. And I think now, particularly now the RPS is offering that advanced credential, I think it's a really good idea to kind of maintain that sort of focus and framework on like documenting, feeling comfortable with asking people to give you feedback. So that's so valuable. Getting the right kind of stuff documented, writing your own reflection, finding ways of getting evidence for different things. You're absolutely right. I think it's really valuable. For yourself, I always say, like, it's so easy to forget what you've done and so easy to sort of dismiss all your achievements. I think it's very easy some ways to focus. I think we compare ourselves a lot with other people, and you'll look at something that someone has done and think, I haven't done that, and discount all the things you have done. So I think using that framework of using the syllabuses and stuff, the framework of the advanced practice, to like really say, okay, but what have I done? Have it documented. I think it gives you a lot of confidence, and will stand you instead if you want to keep progressing further. Because it's very easy for a lot of us to really minimize our achievements. And actually, just in itself, I think that's one of the reasons why people struggle to do their portfolio, is it's quite hard to be that positive about yourself. And that's where you need mentors and coaches and good friends in the professions or in similar fields who can kind of give you that feedback and kind of support you and help you build your confidence in yourself, because you can show that you can see then that you've been doing what's expected and you're moving forward.
Absolutely.
And seeing that progress.
I mean, that brings me to a good point in terms of network. How important is a network in the consultant pharmacist pathway?
I mean, I totally think it's invaluable, particularly because networking and working at a national level is expected as a consultant pharmacist. So you can't work in a silo and be working at a national level. Generally, even if you have managed to do that, people probably would have questions about how you're practicing if you're not engaging with other people around you. It's so vital to be learning from others, sharing with others. So networking is critical. And that can be within your speciality, but also outside. So I spend a lot of time with the neonatal paediatric pharmacy group, but also I've engaged through RPS, through UK CPA. Now we have Consultant Pharmacy Group. Obviously, I've got colleagues from all over the place. And I think you learn different things from different people. As I say, it's not just all about your clinical speciality, but especially because we've got that breadth of the different pillars you need to work on. You can learn from lots of other people. And those people can support you. You can learn from them. They can give you ideas. You can create those new ideas that come out of working outside of your field.
And you've talked a little bit about mentoring other pharmacists, but what was your mentorship journey like as you were kind of experiencing the consultant pharmacist pathway and building that portfolio, or even as a specialist pharmacist and kind of going through your leadership journey? Did you have any specific kind of mentorship that supported you?
I never had a formal mentor in the way that I asked someone to mentor me, which is probably a mistake. But I definitely had really, really good managers and people around me. I had people who had really high expectations. I worked in organisations where my colleagues were active at a really national level. And so it was very much perceived that that was, what you should be doing. And I think that gives you that drive to do it. But also managers who gave you opportunities, to explore the areas that you wanted to do, to grow in your areas, to go off and, to be able to do a secondment, to be able to go and do different courses. You do need people who can share your, ideas about your professional development and support that. So I think if you're not getting that from your line manager, and hopefully they can support you, that's when having, a separate mentor probably is a really good idea to kind of bounce those ideas off and say, these are the things I feel I want to do, and why is that not working? But you have to understand, I think, and I've seen that myself as a manager, that there are times where what a employee wants doesn't really fit with their role. And sometimes you just have to say, I think you can go off and do these incredible things, but there aren't opportunities here right now. And you have to be really fair about that. But so that's why understanding where the limits of being mentored by someone who's your manager and why having a separate mentor could be really helpful. But I think I've been lucky that I've always had really supportive managers. And I think, that's really helpful. But as I say, and just working with loads of incredible people around me in the committees and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, if you're expanding your network and you're part of lots of committees and groups, you're going to be around lots of inspirational pharmacists and other healthcare professionals, and you get a lot of ideas from them. You hear about their stories or something that they've done specifically at work, and you think, okay, well, how can I implement that in my organization, or how can I implement that into my career as well? So it's nice to have that kind of good friendship network. We've talked about, in terms of continuing education, we've talked about the Foundation Pharmacy Framework and the Advanced Pharmacy Framework. We've talked about maybe getting involved with an MSc, which is really interesting because everyone in this series has done so much additional education outside of the traditional kind of clinical diploma, becoming a prescriber. But a lot of you have done either pre-doctoral fellowships or an MSc. So obviously we talked about that in terms of continuing education. But if someone is an aspiring consultant pharmacist, what else could they be doing to help develop themselves in terms of from an educational point of view?
I mean, there definitely are educational things. I think leadership, the NHS offers some really good leadership development courses that step you up through. They've all got names. I can't remember them. But that you can take on and stepwise move up through that series. I think that area is a really good one to look at.
I found the MRes, which is the Masters in Research. I think UCL does one.
Yeah.
And it does combine a lot of the leadership. It has elements of education and training in it, but obviously most of it is research-based.
Yeah.
So you do get a big mix. And I think if you're going to sign up to something, of course, sometimes it's nice to do it in your area of expertise. I mean, I'm working in palliative care, so that kind of feels like the best idea for me. But at the same time, it's quite nice to do something broad, which gives you a lot of different skill sets.
Yeah.
I know that, one of our colleagues, Sian Gaze, she did her master's in education, but there was, again, a big research element to it. So she's got a lot of experience in that area of expertise now and is incorporating that into her day-to-day work as well. So I guess it depends on the person, but follow your passions is what I always say.
Yeah, definitely. Because I would say like a lot of what got my sort of advanced level credentials was around education and leadership. In some ways, at a highest level, you can't really, it's quite hard to be assessed clinically. The difference between advanced and consultant for clinical work is kind of a bit of a grey area. It's not so easy to show. But whereas it's much easier to show like higher level leadership, higher level practice, working across bigger areas, national projects, regional projects. So I think, like I always come back to, that's why that breadth is something you need, and to move your way through that. So yeah, I think you can undertake courses. It's really individual. You have to identify what your gaps are, what opportunities you've got within your role that you're going to learn anyway, and what opportunities you need that extra support. And I think research definitely is the one. And there's lots of different ways of doing that. I'm not necessarily the person to give you all of that info, but even for me, I definitely feel I've got learning needs. And some of the stuff my colleagues have been talking about, I still think I need to go off and do some of that myself. But going through, for example, education, again, recently I've completed, or could have done it, this was almost, that like, well, I haven't done it, so it'd be good to do it as a refresher, was the statement of teaching proficiency. Again, just as it's a credential to show that, the universities expect, if you're looking after, students and stuff, that you've got a background in education. I'd done quite a lot of that in my MSc, but that was quite a lot of years ago, so it was really good to have a refresher. But equally, it's a course that's applicable to people much earlier in their career. So I think that's that kind of thing.
And lastly, I kind of wanted to go back to the fact that being part of organisations is really important in terms of your pathway. So you've had lots of involvement with NPPG. You've also had lots of involvement with RPS and a little bit with UK CPA. I guess, what are the advantages of getting involved with these organisations, but also as a junior pharmacist, someone who's quite early in their journey, how do they get involved?
So as a junior, I suppose, just being a member, knowing about what's going on, engaging with the activities. I think for me, I think face-to-face stuff is super important. So if that, just going along to study days or, events, conferences, that really helps you build your network, because I think although it's amazing how much stuff we can do virtually nowadays, I think that face-to-face connection is super important to build a network. So I think just going along, meeting people, learning from stuff there, that's a really key part of being involved. But also you say if there's local groups or I say we had a London group for MPPG. And so, we start with like volunteering to host a meeting. I got involved in helping run the group when those opportunities came along. So I think, once you start getting involved, then you hear about opportunities. For example, with MPPG, there might be consultations about NICE guidelines and things like that are coming out. So you might be able to feed into those. Yeah, teaching opportunities. I think you can get involved with lots of stuff if you're willing to kind of put yourself forward and just, show that you've got a keen interest. Just speaking to people who've got more experience and who you meet. And I think that's why sometimes when you work in a big organisation, particularly I know a lot of people here, GSTT, then you've got those people like that you work with directly, but you don't have to work for one of those organisations because if you network, you can then meet those people and build those, connections.
The star of the show is a high-strength saffron extract. It's not just any saffron though. This stuff is from Catalonia, Spain, where the climate creates the most potent saffron in the world. It's standardized to 3.5% bioactives, which is fancy talk for super, super effective. This saffron works with your gut to help balance these mood-lifting hormones like serotonin. It's like the peacekeeper for your hormones. But they didn't stop there. They added marine algae for iodine and minerals supporting your thyroid function. And the cherry on top, it can help reduce fatigue and promote better sleep. Because who couldn't use a little more energy and a lot more rest? If you're intrigued, head on over to thenakedpharmacy.com and use code PD20 for 20% off your purchase. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a paediatric pharmacist myself and in palliative care, and when I was new to palliative care, joining the APPM Group, which is the Paediatric Palliative Medicine Group, which is a national organisation, was the perfect opportunity.
Yeah.
It was a great way for me to meet other people and not just pharmacists, because there's not that many. A great way to meet other doctors and nurses and other healthcare professionals who work in this space. They have incredible conferences where, again, you can submit abstracts, you can showcase your work that you're doing. But getting enthusiastic about that and showing interest in doing that allowed my MDT team who I worked with to say, oh, Anisha's really keen with education and training. Why don't you get involved and do some webinars to GPs with us? So the consultants would do a lot of the webinars, and I would have a section doing something very pharmacy or drug specific within that. And then we would grow and I'd get to do things on my own. So that really helped me. It helped me to learn in a new area of expertise. I grew my network at the same time. There were some leadership opportunities. And then APPM decided that they would create their own guidelines for palliative care for different symptoms. So they started off with seizure management and dystonia, shortness of breath and anxiety. And as they were getting involved with creating these guidelines, they were having to review lots of clinical trials and evidence that was out there, review the drugs and the drug formulary, and they just called people to come and support. So then again, opportunities came my way because they knew that I liked getting involved, and they then invited me to do more. And that was a really easy way to just embed myself into that area of expertise. But I also reached out to another palliative care pharmacist in paediatrics at Great Ormond Street because I knew he'd been doing it for many, many years. And I emailed him just to say that, hey, look, I'm new to this specialist area. I've only got 1 day a week at this point to support the team. You're doing it 5 days. Where would you start? What is the most important thing that you would focus on if you only had 1 day a week for your patients? And then how do you grow it? So he gave me some advice and I was able to then implement that. Eventually we did a business case a year later and I ended up working 3 days a week for palliative care. And I audited so much information about what I was doing in my day-to-day job that we obviously got the funding to increase those hours. So things are possible, growth is possible, but a lot of these things have come from my own curiosity and my own interest to learn and to grow and develop in that career. So the consultant pharmacist framework doesn't just fall in your lap. There are so many steps that you have to take to kind of get there. It is a long journey, but it's definitely worth it. So I just want to advise people that actually, if you're starting out as a band 7, or if you're in a GP practice and you've got like a general patients, start exploring those gaps. Start looking at where you don't have that much experience and find opportunities to kind of embark on that journey.
Definitely. Such a good example, what you've given. And as you say, I think, it can be starting really small, like you say, just one guideline. You find the consultant who's keen, or, the doctor or the nurse who's working in that area, and say, oh, I think I can help make this better. Everyone loves that. And, that's a stepping stone into more and more things. Everyone's got to start somewhere, but there's always so much work to be done. And people are always happy when there's someone keen and enthusiastic. And I definitely remember that. It was quite, nice when I wanted to get onto the MPPG committee, but it's an election, and as someone new in the field, it's quite hard to get elected. But what I loved was that the committee were just so positive, and they were like, thank you for trying and keep trying. Don't take this, failure. I think that's probably, again, a thing, like I didn't get in and I could have just thought, oh, well, that's it, it's not for me. But, they were like, don't give up, it can happen. And if so again, I went away, I built my network in London, working with, so more people knew me, and more people knew, and felt, that it was a good idea to support me. So exactly, like you have to, take the wins and the losers and move on from there.
Agreed. Oh, that was perfect. I mean, we had such a good conversation with a lot of variety, actually. When it comes to career development, there are lots of steps we have to take, but they are achievable.
Yeah.
I obviously spoke to Joe earlier about work-life balance in the last couple of episodes. So we talked about the strategies that it takes in terms of time management and understanding that it's a long game and it takes time, but it is absolutely doable. And the frameworks support you on the journey, and that's something to remember, is knowing what's on the frameworks, understanding the details within them, and slowly gaining the experience to kind of push you towards that journey. So thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you so much for taking the time to come onto the podcast today. And really happy that we had a chance to have a conversation.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.
No worries. Thank you guys for tuning in to this week's episode. I am so pleased that we got a chance to dive into career development when it comes to the consultant pharmacist pathway. We have one more episode in this series, which will be coming out in the next few days, so watch this space.